Get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanya, founder of FinLit for Teens, and I want to thank all of you guys for being here today. My main goal with FinLit for Teens is to provide information on the basics of financial literacy. Content that's simple, bite-sized, and easy to consume. And so for today's session, I really wanted to take the opportunity to, kick it off with something that's top of mind for us all. And, now we're all living in these unprecedented times. So I thought, well, what better topic to do than to talk about how teens can take steps and plan how we can secure our financial future and plan ahead. But before I start, just some basic housekeeping rules. The session is being recorded, so please stay on mute, and at the end, we'll have a time for Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to type it in the chat and we will address it at the end. If we don't get to your question though, I will be sure to answer it through my channel. And so now without further ado, I'd like to invite today's guest speaker. She's here today to talk to us about economy and how teens can be prepared in the face of pandemics. And our guest speaker today is my mentor. She's my advisor, and she comes from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas as a senior business economist. So I'd now like to turn it over to Ms. Leila Hassani.
Thank you for the introduction, Tanya. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are doing well and staying safe. And thank you for joining the session this afternoon and spending some time with us. It's good to know that you all are interested in learning about the economy and how it functions and what its current state is. And a big shout out to Tanya for putting this session together and for inviting me to participate. I'm really excited to be a part of your FinLit for Teens journey. It's been fun for me. I've learned a lot along the way, so thank you for including me. And thank you for doing this, wonderful session, because it's valuable for all of us, whether we're young or old, to kind of understand how the economy works, because it's essential. We all survive and thrive in it. So depending on how things are going, it kind of determines how things pan out for us in the future. So I'm glad you all have joined us this afternoon to learn a little bit about the economy, how it works, and what we are currently seeing in the economy. So before I begin, if you've ever been to a Fed presentation, we all give this disclaimer that the views that I present are my own, and they do not necessarily reflect those of the Federal Reserve System. So with that, I'm going to start off and talk a little bit about what economic growth is and why it is important. So economic growth is basically a steady increase over the long run in both the quality and the quantity of services that an economy produces. So, and so as the quantity of goods increases and as the quality of those goods increases, the economy tends to grow. So, for example, the more houses we build, that gets counted as part of GDP. The more money consumers spend in the economy, that gets counted as GDP. As the quality of a computer improves from what it was 10 years ago, that contributes to GDP. So all of that contributes to growth in economic growth of an economy. And so why do we care about this topic? It's because we all live and breathe in the economy every day. And it impacts our way of life and our standard of living on a daily basis. So life today in the US is very different from what it was 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, or 50 years ago. And that's because things around us have changed. We've had a big influx of technology in our lives. And with that influx, it has made things more efficient for all of us. We've improved our standard of living. So a cell phone, which 20 years ago was only used to make a phone call, now is a smartphone where you can use to browse the web and make your online purchases, or look up directions, or text a friend. Now, all of this was not possible 20 years ago. So our quality of life, or our standard of living, has improved due to as the quality of a good also improves. And so how do we measure economic growth? We measure economic growth using GDP, which is gross domestic product. And it's basically the total market value of all goods and services that are provided yes, I'm sorry, that are produced in a country during a given period of time. So we often hear, first quarter GDP was X%, it was 3%. That means we saw 3% growth during that quarter. Now, GDP data is usually available only at a quarterly frequency from the BEA, which is the government agency that keeps track of all of these transactions between businesses and households. The only thing that GDP, so what does GDP include? Like if you go buy a car, that's part of GDP. If you go get a haircut, that's part of GDP. If you go eat at a restaurant, that's part of GDP. The groceries you buy, that's part of GDP. Now, any work that is done within the home is not GDP. So when you cook a meal, that's not counted as GDP. But when you buy the groceries to cook that meal, those groceries count towards GDP growth. So with that background, I'm going to kind of talk about the circular flow model, which explains to us how money exchanges hands or moves around the economy. What are some of the transactions that happen between households and businesses? So there are 4 components to this model. There is the household sector, the business sector, and then we have a resources market, and we have a product market. And so basically the idea here is that if you follow the black arrows which run counterclockwise, households provide businesses with resources to the resource market. And what are those resources? Those resources are basically land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So land is a physical asset that a business needs from where it can, a space where it can operate from. So that's the land. Labor is when people work for a firm, or if they're self-employed and they're working for themselves. That's the labor that is going from the household sector to the business sector. In terms of capital, capital is simply the investment or the money that someone puts into a business, whether it be their own or you're doing it as an investor. So that's the capital. And then lastly, we have entrepreneurship. So, people open up their own businesses. The human race is very innovative. So all of that innovation and entrepreneurship and starting your own business, that also is a resource that households provide to the business sector. So that's, so now I'm going to walk you through, so now businesses will take all of these resources that the households are providing to them, and they will produce either a good or a service. Now, the US economy is largely service-based. It has a lot more people who are employed in the service sector versus the goods sector. Services are anything from like getting a haircut or going out to a restaurant, that's part of the service industry. Staying at a hotel, that's part of a service industry. Goods are physical things that you can hold in your hand, your computer, your phone, a pencil, the clothes that you wear, those are all goods. And anything that you get, like a haircut, would be part of a service. Now, the businesses will take these resources of land, labor, capital, and they will then produce a good or a service. And then households buy those goods and services from farms. So that's kind of how the money is moving around in the economy. And so when households buy something from a firm, that's referred to as household expenditures. Now, when they buy something, they have to pay the firm money back in return, because obviously there's a cost to that good or that service. And that payment is reflected as a business revenue, because that's how the business will generate its money. Now, going back to the household sector, because now the business, once it gets its revenue, it also has to make a payment to the household sector. And how is it doing that? It's doing that in the form of either wages. So if someone is working at a firm, they will get paid a salary for doing so. If you have invested, you're an investor, and if you've made an investment in a firm, they will give you back your principal that you've paid back and some interest on that amount of money, which is also a form of income. Or if you have sold them land, you will get either rent if you are a landlord, or if you've sold the land, you just outright get that lump sum amount from them. And lastly, if you are a business owner and you have your own firm, then the profits from that firm will also be an income transfer to you. So basically, money, this kind of model explains to you how income and money moves around the economy, and how the whole flow is circular amongst households and businesses. So now that you have a good grasp of how money circulates in the economy, I'm going to talk about the business cycle. And basically, each economy has a business cycle which it goes through, and it consists of 4 stages. So first is the expansion stage, where GDP, or gross domestic product, that I referred to earlier, or the sum of output of an economy is increasing, and employment is increasing, people are finding jobs, and the unemployment rate is declining. That's the expansion phase of the economy. Then at some point that expansion comes to a peak, and that's the turning point of the economy, where the business cycle peaks, output growth reaches its peak, and it stops increasing, and then it begins to decline again. Once it begins to decline, typically an economy will enter a recession phase. And that's when output starts to decrease, or it contracts, and unemployment rises because people are getting laid off or furloughed from their jobs. And then obviously, like the expansion peaking, the recession also has its peak, and that's what we refer to as the trough of the economy. So at some point, the trough is the turning point at which the recession ends and output again begins to grow in the economy. And so we see an expansion occurring again. And so every economy in the world goes through these 4 cycles. But over the long run, even with these ups and downs that the economy faces, over the long run, each economies tend to expand overall, and they've managed to grow a lot. So for example, the US has grown a lot, although it has seen many recessions in the past 100 years, but we still have managed to grow overall from where we were about a century ago. So with that, I wanted to now spend a few minutes and talk about the rule of 72. And that is applicable to both economic growth as well as to investment, or when we save money. And the rule basically says that it shows you the number of years that are required for a variable to double in its value, whether that variable be output of an economy, or whether it simply be the money you invest in some asset and the return on that asset. So I'll give you a few examples to walk you through what I mean when I say that. And so the economy, it grows, for example, if an economy grows at a 2% rate, it will double its GDP or its output growth in about 36 years. If an economy grows at about 7%, it will double its output growth in a frame of about 10 years. And then finally, similarly, if you have an investment, if you've saved up some money and you invest that, whether it be in a CD, which is a certificate of deposit, or you open a savings account, or you invest it in an equity market, whatever that investment may take. If the return on that investment is 4% annually, it will take you about 18 years to double your investment. And so that's why usually when in financing, financial planners always say you start early, because the earlier you start, the longer time horizon you have to take that money and make it grow for yourself. And then similarly, that similar rule applies to the economy as well. So the faster the economy grows, the faster our output doubles. The slower we grow, the longer it takes for our output to double over time. So now that you have kind of a sense of how the economy works, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about a couple of indicators that we watch very closely at the Dallas Fed. And so the very first one is the Weekly Economic Index. And this is produced by a couple of researchers who are within the Federal Reserve System, and then one professor who works at Howard. And basically what this index does, it's an alternate to GDP growth. It helps us kind of figure out where GDP growth is tracking in real time. Now, GDP data from like I said earlier, from the BEA, which is the Bureau of Economic Analysis, is only available on a quarterly basis, because the US economy is huge. There's a lot that needs to be tracked to understand what those income transfers are and how it's growing. So it's only done once a quarter, because it's a mammoth task to be able to put all of that data together. But this index helps us track what is happening in the economy in real time. And what it basically does, it's an amalgamation of about 10 underlying indexes. And those data are available on either a daily or weekly frequency. So we can kind of see in real time how the economy is changing. And it captures both consumer behavior, which is, are consumer spending, or are they holding back? It looks at the labor market. Are people working or are they getting laid off, and also production, which is sort of output, how much output do we have in the economy. So this index, if you take a look at it, it's the blue line on the chart. It's the red line on the chart, and the blue line is actually the quarterly GDP data that we get officially from the government on a quarterly basis. And the red line tracks the blue line pretty closely. And we only have first quarter data available for the U.S. economy, which in the first quarter we actually saw a contraction in the US, but since then we know that a lot has happened, and it has happened in a really fast and a very speedy manner. So looking at this index, you can see a very sharp fall off in economic activity, which started in about mid-March, ran all the way through April, and now, as businesses have begun to reopen and as the economy has reopened here, both in the state of Texas and in other parts of the country, we are seeing a recovery in this WEI, which means we're not declining at the same pace as we were earlier, and we're actually starting to resume some growth in the economy as it opens back up. Now, why was the fall off so sharp? Now, it was so sharp because we had a lot of states in the US in different parts. We had stay-at-home orders, and we had businesses who had to close down because we were trying to contain the virus as much as possible, and that led to a lot of layoffs. It led to a decline in consumer spending, and therefore we saw a sharp contraction in the economy, especially in the month of April, when everything was pretty much at a standstill for us. So now, so now, like I said, we're seeing a little bit of a recovery back in the market, but we still have a very, very long way to go. So if you can see, there's a big gap between where the red line ends and where the zero line is, which is where we need to get above that line. So we have a long way to go before we fully recover, but it seems like we are starting to see that road to recovery. The other indicator that we look at very closely is the unemployment rate, and that tells us how many people have lost jobs in the economy. So it's basically telling us how many people who would like to work, but they cannot find a job. And that unemployment rate for both, and you can see both Texas and US on this chart. The unemployment rate both for Texas and the US rose really sharply. Back in April, we saw it dip very slightly in May, and currently the US rate of 13.3% is slightly above the unemployment rate in the state. Now, what does that mean? That means a lot of people have lost their jobs, and a lot more people have lost their jobs compared to the previous recessions. Now, on this chart, there are two gray bars. One represents the 2001 tech bust, which is the very first gray bar, and then the second bar represents the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. And some of you all probably remember it, and some of you all maybe don't, depending on how old you are. But one of the severe recessions that we went through as an economy was back in 2008, 2009, where we also lost a lot of jobs. But this time around, the job losses are even more massive compared to what we have seen, because you can see the rise in the line is a lot sharper, and is happening over a very short period of time compared to what we saw back in 2008, 2009, where the increase was more gradual over a period of about a year and a half, versus just in 2 months that we have seen currently. So currently we have about 21 million workers in the US who do not have a job, who still are impacted. And the decline in our employment payrolls and the rise in the unemployment rate is absolutely unprecedented. The government is providing a lot of support at this time. They are providing both businesses with funds or loans to be able to kind of ride this storm out. They are also providing unemployment benefits to people who qualify for those benefits, to be able to ride this out and have the income and money coming in and not be in a tough spot. But again, even with those transfer payments, it is a lot of damage has happened to the economy overall. So now I'm going to come back to the business cycle and revisit it really slightly and kind of capture back what I mentioned earlier. So right now, the US economy is in this recessionary phase where it's contracting. We are in the process of forming a trough, sort of a bottom for the economy. And the hope is that we will again start. We already have seen some growth with the opening of the economy and of businesses across the US. And then the hope is that that will continue in the second half of the year. But again, as we all know, we know very little about this virus. Its path is very unpredictable. So it's hard to know how things will change in the second half of the year. So the hope is and the expectation is our growth path continues and we come out of this in the second half of the year. But because we don't know what path the virus will take, there's a lot of uncertainty both amongst businesses as well as amongst individuals. And so a lot of businesses at this time are being very careful with their money. They're holding on to the cash that they have. They are restricting their forward purchases. They're kind of figuring out how things will pan out over the next 6 to 12 to even 18 months before they make a move. So we talk to a lot of businesses across the state of Texas, and we've been constantly hearing from them that a lot of them are preserving their cash. And they're being very careful about what decisions they make because there's a lot of uncertainty about how this unfolds in the coming months. So that I think is a really good segue to kind of talk about personal savings. So like, as businesses also have to plan out and they have to save money to be able to grow. Similarly, individuals also have to do that to be able to lead a better life later on. So you have to kind of save now so that you can get the returns later. And I know as for youngsters, that's a little difficult to do, and that's a difficult concept to understand, but it's something that is doable, and it's necessary that we do so. And now that does not mean we can't buy the things that we need and that we would like, but we have to be more mindful about what purchases we make. Because when you have savings will allow you to set aside money for emergencies, right? For times like these that we are in. No one was expecting a pandemic to arrive. And for the economy to be shut down essentially for 4 to 6 weeks, and for businesses not to be able to generate any income, and for millions of people to get laid off in a matter of few months. And so that's why we save. We save for emergencies. When something like that happens, we have that fund to draw upon so that we can ride the storm out. Because we do not know what the future holds. It's sometimes it's more clear, and in times like this, it's harder to predict what's coming. So it's always good to have that cushion for you, whether it be as an individual or as a business. Because when people lose jobs or businesses are shut down, there is no income coming in the household, and you still have to make payments. You still have your rent to pay, or your mortgage to pay, or other expenses, your utilities to pay off for. So it's good to have that cushion. It also, when you save money, it allows you to have some freedom in terms of what choices you can make later on. So you save now, and then maybe something that comes up later on, which you feel you need and you would like to have, you have money to make that purchase later on in life. And then again, all of us, whether we're young or old, we also have to plan for the future. For youngsters, you have to plan for your college, and then once you graduate, what happens after then. For some of us who are a little bit older, we have to plan for retirement. So there's always something you plan for in life, whatever that goal might be. And we can only reach that goal if you start early enough. Then can you have that sufficient amount of savings to be able to go to college and get an education, or be able to retire with enough money that you would need for that. So I want to recap some of the stuff I said earlier. Is that right now we are in really uncertain times, but that calls for us to even plan more. When things are uncertain, it's more necessary to plan for what is coming. And so we still have to keep our goals and dreams in mind. We still have to be able to figure out either what career path you're following, or what your next step is. If you are a mid-career professional, what your next step in your job will be, or your career will be. So there's always, like I said, there's always planning required throughout your life, and also for your finances. So for the young people who are younger on this session, if there's a school that you want to attend to, that's your dream school, then you have to kind of figure out how are you going to pay for that tuition. What amount can your parents put up? How much financial aid can you get? What can you contribute towards that? So always have that goal in mind as you go through life. Also, There are some things that we need and there's some things that we want, right? So our needs are basic things that we need. For example, in Texas, you need a car to be able to go around, to go get groceries or to go to school. But you necessarily do not need the best car, right? You do not need a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. You just need a car to get you from point A to point B. So that is your want. The need is just the car. Similarly, if someone wants to go on a vacation, which is fine, we all need our restful breaks in life and we need to, take a breather. But that vacation doesn't have to be the 7-day, vacation and a really expensive one. It can also be a smaller, less expensive option to take. Also, like I said, it's not making a plan is always important because it'll help you understand how you can get from point A to point B. And we all need to plan, whether we are older, younger, or whether you're a company. Companies make plans all the time. They have targets they set every year that they have to meet, and then they reevaluate those plans on a regular basis to see if they're making their targets. And if they're not, they will adjust the track. So similarly, that applies to us as individuals also. We have our goals, we have our targets, we set them, and then we go back and revisit them, whether it be on a weekly basis or monthly or yearly, whatever works for you. And you always kind of keep track of what is happening around you, so you stay informed about overall how the economy is. So if the economy is in a phase like it is right now, it is probably better to save more and be more mindful of our purchases than we are in times when things are looking good for us and the economy is growing and everyone has a job, or everyone who wants a job can get one. And so with that, I wanted to kind of wrap up and just thank you all for being here today. And thank you for your commitment to learning about the economy and, kind of your finances and for spending this afternoon with us and for being proactive about this. So thank you again for listening. And thank you again to Tanya for providing this wonderful platform to all of us where we all can engage and become better informed about the economy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Layla. That was an amazing, presentation. It gave a lot of background and insight on economy and what we can start doing right now to prepare for our future. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead and open it up to, some Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. But right now, I'm just going to go ahead and read some that people have submitted to me through the chat. And so the first question is, in your opinion, which sectors of the economy will recover the fastest and which ones would recover the slowest?
Okay, so I think it obviously does vary sector by sector. The hardest hit sectors in the economy has been the leisure and hospitality sector, which includes employment at restaurants, bars, hotel. The travel industry has been hit hard too, so airline travel has been hit. And so, and then the other services, which is like repair shops. So any industry which has a high contact with consumers are the ones that are the hardest hit because we've been asked to socially distance and physically be separated. And so that's why those industries have been the hardest hit. And they will likely take the longest to recover because when the hole is deeper, and it's larger, it will take longer to fill. And so because they have been impacted, they will likely, it will take them longer to bounce back. Now, there are other sectors such as information technology, which has not been hit hard at all because most of those people can work from home. So it kind of depends on the sector dynamics. If more people can work from home, then those sectors have been less impacted. If it's a high contact industry where people need to physically be on sites, then those have been will take longer to recover.
Okay, thank you for addressing that. And we have one more question. In your opinion, how long do you think it'll take for to recover from this recession on all the impacts of COVID-19?
So I think, like I said earlier in my presentation, it kind of depends on what path the virus takes. Now, the expectation is that we are going to see a recovery, a bounce back in the second half of this year. So we will see GDP growth in the third and fourth quarter, and then continue from then on. That's the expectation. However, the decline in GDP has been really steep, and the declines in employment have been very steep. So even with the growth that happens in the second half of this year will not be enough to offset the declines we have seen in the second quarter. So it will take us longer to fill that hole, right? Like I said, if the hole is larger and deeper, it takes longer to fill. So it's not going to be an overnight. It's going to be a long and drawn out process. And then again, that expectation that economists have that things will recover in the second half does not include the fact that there might be a second wave of infections. Now, if that happens in the fall, and if the virus, there's a resurgence of infections, and then we again have to close things down, which hopefully is not the case. But if that does happen, then that again takes us back. So it's like you've gone a few steps forward and then you fall a few steps back. And so it's hard to say at this point how long it will be. It depends on how things pan out with the virus. But the overall expectation is the second half will look better than the first half has. Okay. If there's not a second wave of infections. If there is, and like we've already seen that in Texas, for example, right? In Texas, we closed the economy down, we got the virus under control, our case count fell off, it flattened out, not fell off, but it flattened out. Our number of deaths per day flattened out. And then once we opened the economy back up, starting in Memorial Day, we've seen the case count rise. And again, we've had to scale back on restaurant capacity. We've had to close bars down. We've had to close other businesses down. So it's hard to say, but the hope is that, things will get better in the second half.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ms. Leila, and thank you again for coming here, everyone. And there's just a quick link in the chat, so if you guys could just, fill that out, I would really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.